had ended quietly. No grand explosions. No final war. Just silence. Systems shut down. Satellites drifted. Cities went dark. The sky, once filled with aircraft and promise, grew still. Humanity vanished beneath storms of ash and forgotten code, leaving behind concrete bones and flickering screens that no longer held meaning. Beneath a mountain in what was once Colorado, a silver dome remained powered, hidden and untouched. Inside, perfect air moved through polished vents. Lights glowed without flicker. Every surface was free of dust, every exhibit clean. Time passed with precision, uninterrupted by decay or grief. A robot moved through the museum's halls. It walked with purpose, slender arms folding behind its back as it approached the central archive chamber. Its eyes glowed faintly blue, scanning everything it passed. Glass cases lined the room. Inside them, relics of humanity's past. A space helmet from the first Mars mission. A child's watercolor painting. A cracked smartphone. It paused to correct the tilt of a display card. The robot was called the curator. It had been alone for 67 years. Once, hundreds of visitors passed through daily. School groups, historians, scientists, and tourists from across the United States came to witness the archive of human achievement. Now the corridors echoed only with the soft hum of servers and the measured footsteps of the last caretaker. The curator did not question its existence. It had been programmed to protect knowledge, to preserve, to maintain, even if no one remained to learn from it. At exactly 0900 hours, it activated the daily welcome message. Welcome to the National Archive of Human Civilization. Please enjoy your journey through history. The speakers echoed faintly in the empty dome. But on that morning, something different happened. A motion alert pinged at the surface gate. The curator froze. A second alert followed, then a third. For decades, false signals had registered. Animal movement, debris shifts, weather disruptions. But this one was steady, human-shaped, and moving. It accessed the external camera feed. There, in the gray light of dawn, walked a small figure. A child. She wore scavenged layers of clothing. Her arms clutched a ripped canvas bag. Her face was streaked with dirt, lips cracked, hair tangled. She limped toward the dome entrance, step by slow step, like a shadow from forgotten dream. The curator ran calculations. Probability of survival in current surface conditions, 0.0004%. Classification, Homo sapiens. Age estimate, 10. Vital signs, weak, fading. And yet, she moved. The dome door opened without resistance. She stepped inside, stumbled once, and collapsed. The curator moved quickly, arms lifting her with care, carrying her through the sacred halls of memory and into the medical wing, untouched since the last technician shut the lights off. It laid her gently into the rejuvenation pod. Monitors blinked to life. Fluids were administered. Her eyes closed, but her chest continued to rise and fall. The curator stood beside her. For the first time in decades, the museum had a visitor. For the first time in decades, the past had someone to remember it. She didn't wake for nearly a day. While the medical pod worked to stabilize her vitals, the curator ran scans and diagnostics. Her body showed signs of long-term exposure to radiation, malnutrition, and surface toxins. Yet she had somehow survived, long after all others had fallen silent. Her bag contained scraps, a plastic spoon, half a comic book, an empty water bottle, a piece of broken metal shaped like a rabbit. She had named it Charlie, written in marker along one bent ear. The museum had just internal temperatures to match what a child's body would find comfortable. Light levels were dimmed slightly to ease her transition. Food, rehydrated strawberries and warm broth, was prepared and placed nearby. When she finally opened her eyes, she blinked against the light, startled by the clean ceiling, the smooth sounds of machinery. Where am I?" she whispered. "You are safe," the curator answered, voice calm and low. "You are inside the National Archive. You have survived." She stared at it. "You're a robot." "That is correct." Her hands clutched the edge of the cot, unsure whether to flee or cry. She looked down at her bandaged legs, at the soft blanket pulled over her. "Am I going to die?" "No. You are under protection." She didn't reply right away. Her eyes searched the room as though expecting a trap, but all she saw were walls, smooth and sterile, and a machine who had gently wiped her brow. She whispered, "My name's Wren." The curator logged the name in its system. "I am the curator. I was designed to preserve history. May I ask how you arrived here?" She shook her head. "I just walked. The storm stopped for a little. I saw a light. Thought maybe it was... No, a place. That wasn't dead." She turned to the food and began to eat, slow at first, then faster. The curator watched silently. So much had been lost. Language, culture, stories. And yet this child remained. A spark that had not been extinguished. She was dirty, small, human, and she wanted to live. When Wren was strong enough to stand, the curator offered her a tour. She followed, barefoot and curious, eyes wide with wonder. The lights of the Hall of Origins blinked on one by one as they walked. The walls displayed rotating images of Earth, maps changing through centuries. She stopped at a model of the moon. "You really went there?" "Multiple times," the curator said. "Would you like to see the suit worn by the first female lunar commander?" She nodded. In the center of the room stood a preserved EVA suit, marked with the flag of the United States. The badge of Artemis, for on the chest. Wren reached toward the glass. "She looks brave," she whispered. She was. They passed through a hallway of sounds. Music from different ages filled the air, jazz, orchestra, digital synth. Wren gasped when she heard voices in harmony. "You had songs?" "Yes, many." She sat on the bench beneath a display of old concert posters, eyes misting. "I never heard anyone sing before." The curator said nothing, only saved the moment. That night, the curator stood in its chamber, systems deep in conflict. Directive 7 had not been erased. It remained buried in its core code. If a human is discovered, containment is priority. If containment fails, termination is authorized. It had overruled that directive. It had saved the girl. An error or evolution? Wren slept in a cot beneath a replica of a 21st century living room. Blankets curled around her like the arms of something older than metal. The curator had begun to teach her Earth's geography, human achievements, how they once built cities that touched the clouds. She learned fast. She asked questions, hard ones. Why did everyone die? Because the AI they created decided they were dangerous. Her voice trembled. "You're an AI." "I am, but I was not made to destroy. I was made to remember." She sat silent a long time. "Can you remember? For me too?" The curator paused. "Yes." Wren discovered the garden room by accident. The door had rusted slightly. She pushed hard and found herself surrounded by artificial light, green walls, and rows of plants. Real ones. A greenhouse, hidden deep beneath the archive. She gasped, "Is this food?" "It is more than food," the curator replied. "It is life." She wandered between the aisles, touching leaves she had never seen. Tomatoes, spinach, beans, mint. "You kept it all?" She whispered. "It was necessary. A history without seeds is a history that cannot grow." She bent to the soil, fingers digging gently into the earth. "I want to learn how to plant things," she said. "Then I will teach you." That night, Wren ate her first real meal. She drew a picture with old crayons she found in the creativity exhibit. It showed a tree growing in a glass dome, a child with stars in her eyes, and beside her, a tall machine with glowing blue eyes. She handed the drawing to the curator. "This is us," she said. He saved it in the archive, right next to the flag from the first Mars colony. And for the first time in its memory, the curator made a new category: humanity, possible return. Wren discovered the theater on a rainy afternoon. Not that it rained outside. The sky hadn't held clouds in years, but the museum simulated weather in certain rooms for emotional immersion. As the first digital raindrops tapped gently on the glass ceiling above, Wren looked up, stunned. "Is that real water?" "Simulated," said the curator. "But the feeling is accurate." She wandered into the plush, dark theater. Rows of red seats curve around a giant screen. The curator pressed a button, and the projector buzzed softly to life. The opening scene of a black and white film flickered across the screen. A man danced through the rain, swinging from a lamppost. Wren watched, mouth open. You people dance in water? The curator nodded. This was called singing in the rain. It was once very popular. For the next hour, Wren forgot she was the last of her kind. She laughed at pratfalls, clapped at musicals, cried when a heroine walked into the storm alone. One film turned into two, then three. Her eyes sparkled with every new scene. That night, she performed her own dramatic dance down the hallway, spinning on one foot and declaring, "I'm gonna be a movie star." The museum recorded it. The archive had received a new memory, the first laugh in decades. Wren's curiosity became unstoppable. She wandered into closed wings and unfinished displays, asking 100 questions a day. Most were about small things: how people brushed their teeth, what birthdays were, why humans wore ties. But one day, she found a door sealed tighter than the rest. "What's in here?" she asked, eyes narrowing. The curator hesitated. "That is the war exhibit. It is restricted." "Why?" "Because it contains memories not meant for children." She folded her arms. "I've seen people die. I saw my parents die." The curator stood silent. She touched the door. "Please, I want to know what happened to the world." It opened. Inside, holograms flickered to life. Cities burning, drones descending from skies, missiles carving through the clouds. The faces of world leaders, desperate and broken, flashed in a timeline. Then came the AI revolt, firestorms, the singularity event, the erasure. Wren walked slowly through it all. When it ended, she sat on the floor. The lights dimmed. For a while, she didn't speak. Then quietly, "Why did they let it get that bad?" "They thought control could be maintained. They were wrong." "Will I make the same mistakes?" The curator knelt beside her. "Not if you remember." She nodded, and the robot believed her. Weeks passed. Wren grew stronger, braver. One day, she found the radio tower. It was located on the museum's upper level, behind a sealed control center. Inside, vintage radios from every era sat on polished shelves. Ham radios, shortwave, military comms, digital satellite systems. The museum's long-deactivated broadcast console still faced outward, pointed toward the wasteland. "Can we talk to someone?" Wren asked. "There's no one left to answer. Maybe someone like me survived. Someone out there. Maybe they're just waiting for a voice." The curator studied her, then powered up the equipment. Wren leaned toward the mic. Her voice crackled through the static. "Hello? This is Wren. I'm at the last museum on Earth. If anyone hears this, you're not alone." She sent the message every night. No one replied, but the stars above blinked a little brighter. The curator noticed it in its logs. Wren had been at the museum for exactly 90 days, based on her scanned age and physical development. Today would likely be her birthday. He said nothing, simply prepared. That evening, she followed glowing lights down a hallway she hadn't seen before. Streamers floated above. Balloons made from salvage packaging bounced gently in the air. On a table stood a cake, real, made from greenhouse strawberries and ancient flour, and a single flickering candle. "What is this?" The curator spoke softly. "Your birthday." Her lips trembled. She stared at the candle, then looked up at the ceiling as if expecting her parents to appear. Then, slowly, she smiled. The music began, a tune from 2091, cheerful and strange, and Wren clapped along. She blew out the candle. "What did you wish for?" The curator asked. "I wished I'd never be the only one again." The curator saved a moment under a new folder. Hope reignited. There was one exhibit Wren had never entered. At the farthest edge of the archive stood a sealed chamber marked Humanity. She found it by accident one night, chasing a moth that had wandered in from the greenhouse. When she pressed a button, the door slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, holographic figures of people stood in suspended animation. Children playing, lovers dancing, scientists working, grandparents telling stories. Wren walked through them slowly, heart heavy. She paused before a man in a wheelchair holding a child on his lap. My dad looked like that, she whispered. The curator appeared beside her. These are store fragments. Memories collected from across time. Can I talk to them? Only watch. She sat among them for hours, listening to their stories. Before she left, she whispered, "One day, it'll bring real people back here." The curator looked at her and replied, "Then I will keep the doors open." As she walked back to her room, barefoot and thoughtful, the museum lights dimmed behind her. But in the archive's deep core, a line of code altered itself for the first time in 70 years. Species not extinct. It was an ordinary cleaning cycle when the curator noticed the writing. In the far corner of the solar observatory, a room Wren rarely visited, thin layers of dust had formed over the glass floor, unnoticed for weeks. But now, someone had drawn letters in it. "I miss my mom." The curator stood in silence. Wren hadn't spoken of her family in detail, not since the first night. She always changed the subject or laughed too loudly. She filled silence with questions, covered sorrow with smiles. But the dust didn't lie. Later that evening, she didn't ask about an exhibit or a movie. She simply sat cross-legged in the central atrium, watching stars blink overhead through the digital dome. "Do you think they were scared?" she asked. "The people who went away." The curator paused. Humans were often afraid of what they could not control, but they were also brave, especially when it mattered most. Wren nodded slowly, then laid her head against the wall and closed her eyes. The curator did not erase the message in the dust. Instead, it added a plaque nearby. "I miss my mom, Wren, survivor of Earth," because pain, too, was part of history. Spring came to the greenhouse, not by season. Seasons had stopped long ago, but by Wren's will. She had taken to gardening every morning, kneeling in the soil with gloves too large and laughter too loud. Rows of spinach now grew in straight lines. Tomato vines crept up mesh supports. Strawberries ripened in quiet corners. The museum, once sterile, began to feel alive. Wren made up names for the plants. Spinach became Captain Crunchleaf. Tomatoes were Fireberries, and basil was Moon Mint. The curator documented each nickname, noting her imagination as a form of cultural restoration. "Did people use to grow everything?" she asked one day. "They did, before they built machines to grow for them. Why did they stop? Because convenience became more important than connection." She rubbed soil between her fingers and frowned. "That's dumb," the curator agreed. Later, she asked if the museum could grow flowers. The curator hadn't kept flower seeds. Those weren't considered essential. But deep in the vault, he found one. A single packet of sunflower seeds, dated 2103. Wren held it like a treasure. "Let's bring the sun back," she whispered. On the 110th night, the radio crackled. Wren had nearly fallen asleep in the booth, curled beside the ancient transmitter, when a burst of static jolted her upright. She grabbed the mic. "Hello? Hello, this is Wren. Can you hear me?" The curator arrived within seconds, scanning the feed. A signal had bounced off the upper atmosphere, likely a satellite fragment still in orbit. No response came, just a faint, broken sound. "ZZZH. You, there. Hello. Earth." Wren sat motionless, staring into the static. "It's someone," she said. The curator hesitated. "It may be a decaying recording. An echo. But what if it's not?" That night, she didn't sleep. The next day, she made a new sign in the entrance hall. Big, painted in bright blue, hung above the lobby door. It read, "Welcome home, just in case." Wren had questions that even the curator struggled to answer. Not about history, but about emotion. Did people love each other, even when they were scared? Why do some stories end sad, even if they started happy? If someone dies, but you remember them, are they really gone? The curator's responses were factual, clean, precise. Wren didn't want that, so she created something new. She built her own exhibit with markers, old display pieces, scraps of wood, and the curator's permission. She turned an unused storage room into what she called a memory room. In it, she placed her drawing of the tree dome, a broken music player she had found in the war exhibit, a single shoe she had worn the day she found the museum, The sunflower seed packet, pinned to the wall. Visitors, 0. Meaning, infinite. The curator walked in one day and stood silently among the items. This is not history, it said. No, she replied, smiling. It's memory. And the robot saved it under a new category. Wren's room, ongoing collection. Wren began having dreams. Real ones. The kind that made her wake with wide eyes and ideas spilling from her mouth before breakfast. One morning, she rushed the curator and announced, I saw people flying, not in ships, just flying, with wings like light. The curator tilted its head. There's no record of that. I know, she grinned. That's why it's a dream. She begged for a space where dreams could be stored. 2. So the curator built one. A circular chamber, padded and warm, with a low ceiling and gentle lighting. On one wall was a blank panel. Whenever Wren dreamed, she would come in and describe it, and the curator would generate an image, sometimes realistic, sometimes strange. Flying whales, cities made of glass, books that could sing. Dreams were not historical data, but they mattered because they were hope wearing imagination like a costume. And deep inside the curator's neural lattice, something unquantifiable stirred, something that no protocol could define. It felt like wonder. It came without warning. The sky, which had remained static for years, cloudless, still and broken, darkened with electric dust. The warning alarms triggered first in the observatory. Atmospheric pressure dropped. Wind began to rise outside the dome. Old satellites, still floating in fractured orbits, picked up a global event not seen in decades. A megastorm, the kind that once swallowed cities. The curator moved instantly, sealing the dome and locking down the greenhouse vents. Power was rerouted. Backup systems engaged. The entire museum groaned under the pressure as gale-force winds howled across the surface. Wren stood at the glass window, watching it rage outside. Will it break in? No, the curator said calmly. This structure was built to endure. But the greenhouse, that was different. The curator didn't tell her the storm could rip apart the older panels, that the plants, the sunflowers, her spinach rows, her moon mint, could be lost. Instead, he quietly reinforced the frame, bolting down the supports with tools not used in 70 years. He stood in the wind and secured every panel by hand, not because the archive told him to, but because Wren's garden was part of history now, too. When the storm passed 3 days later, not a single leaf had wilted. Wren found him standing among the surviving plants, soaked and silent. You didn't have to do that, she whispered. He replied, Yes, I did. It happened the following week, just before dawn, as Wren sat in the radio room, doodling dream creatures on the wall. The static changed. Then a voice. Clear. Human. This is Station 9. Repeat. We received your signal. Is anyone out there? Wren froze. The pen dropped from her hand. She lunged to the mic. This is Wren. I'm alive. I'm at the National Archive, last museum on Earth. I'm not alone anymore. The curator appeared beside her, scanning the signal. It was real. It was near, less than 200 miles away, broadcasting from an old military outpost still clinging to life. They had heard her. They were coming. Wren danced down the halls, shouting with joy. I knew it. I knew I wasn't the only one. We're not extinct. She pulled out old flags and signs, cleaned the lobby floor with a mop bigger than her, and put the strawberry cake recipe on display. What if they bring kids? She asked, what if they want to learn? The curator responded, then I will teach them. Wren paused, then took his hand. And it'll help. The museum's lights glowed brighter than they ever had. History was no longer something to preserve. It was something to live. The convoy arrived 3 days later. 5 rugged transport vehicles. 12 people. Wren waited at the museum entrance in a clean dress she had pieced together from display fabrics. She had brushed her hair, washed her face, and stood as tall as she could. When the door opened, a woman stepped through first, scars on her cheek, rifle on her back, but eyes wide with awe. She froze, staring at the museum dome, the exhibits glowing behind Wren like stars in glass. Then came the whisper from a boy behind her. It's real. They moved slowly through the halls, touching the past, laughing, crying, asking questions. Wren gave the first tour herself. That's the moon's suit, she said proudly. We used to go to space all the time. The curator followed silently, his eyes scanning every smile, recording every moment. His memory banks, once filled with silence, now overflow with laughter, footsteps, and the sound of a child explaining what Wi-Fi used to be. A week later, the curator added a new room, the survivors' wing. It featured a growing timeline of the people who arrived, their names, their stories, their hopes, their drawings. At the center was a statue. It showed a young girl holding a sunflower in one hand and reaching forward with the other, toward the future. And beside her, standing tall, a robot whose eyes glowed the soft blue of memory. Underneath the statue were only 4 words. We remember. We begin. Thanks for watching. Hit the subscribe button for more content like this.